I think I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kariann Anderson. I am the Event Supervisor for Amazing Arthropods. I'm super excited to be here today. This is new for me, so I'm not new to arthropods, however. My specialty is actually in the biological sciences, particularly wildlife management, or my study was mainly with birds. But because I had that little bit of background, I was asked to coach Amazing Arthropods several years ago. So I've been where you are all sitting today as a newbie. Some of you are probably not so new, but and I started looking at the study guide and everything that was involved and couldn't pronounce half the words that I was reading. And I said, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? I promise you it's not that bad. You will actually start to love arthropods, and you will get really weird about them too. You'll get really excited about finding these things with your students. I promise you that. There's a lot to cover. There's a part 1 and a part 2. The part 1 is the actual examination, or what would appear to be like a lab practical, where your students will enter into a room by themselves. There will be stations set up, and they will have 1 minute per station where they will rotate. And there'll be a series of questions depending on the level of difficulty, from 3 to 6 questions in that minute. It's a Scantron fill-in-the-blank situation, so your students can guess if they're running out of time. The tiebreaker for this year is going to be a written portion from the rotation of the stations. So we will only be grading that answer if there's in fact an actual tie. So most of it will be on the zip grade, which appears to be like a modern version of Scantron. Fill in the blanks. So make sure your students know how to fill in bubbles properly. And then the second portion is the collection. And that's when your students have to determine whether they're going to do a photographic collection or a pinned collection. So we'll be talking about both of those. To start out, you will see on the Science Olympiad website, you have your rules, and you also have a study guide. The study guide looks like this. It's very thick. And your rules, 1 or 2 pages. Okay. So make sure, because I just learned this, make sure you have the 2018 study guide, because it has grown quite a bit. Okay? Yeah. As far as the rules go, for part 1, you are required to know Arthropod classes, insect orders, and specific species. Okay? As far as the arthropod classes go, we have bulleted 6 arthropod classes that your students will need to know. There are more arthropod classes out there in the world. We've focused you on just these 6. So remember that. Yes?
And that's in the study guide?
That is in the rules.
In the rules.
And the study guide, for that matter. Absolutely. And out of these 6, you have your Arachnida, your Chilopoda, Collembola, Diplopida, Insecta, and Malacostraca. If for some reason you're not able to pronounce any of these words and you'd like to learn how to properly, you can go onto a YouTube site called Emma Says, E-M-M-A Says. You can type in any biological term, or any term for that matter, and Emma will say it, 6 times over in 16 seconds or something like that. And your students could have fun just typing in those words and listening to how they're pronounced and mimicking it, because that's how you start. Okay, that's how you start. You start broad, you start broad with your classes, and then you start narrowing down. Getting them comfortable with saying the words, and then understanding how to visually recognize them, what's their basic biology and anatomy and so forth. And all of that is really well represented in your study guide. You have diagrams for anatomy, you have nice little descriptions of each one of those for you. There are several different websites recommended for you to go to. So I believe the Arthropod classes are really well represented in the study guide. Insect orders, so now you take one of the classes called Insecta, and we're focusing you on orders. So there are 14 orders there for you to study with your students. There are more insect orders out there in the world. These are the 14 we're focusing on. There's 2 that we added from last year. The Ephemeroptera, the one that starts with an E, and Megaloptera. Now, the reason why I placed those there, because there's a common misconception. When your students look up Ephemeroptera, they're going to see a lot of images, right? They're going to see pictures of Ephemeroptera. The first thing they're going to say is, oh, those are fish flies. They're mayflies, okay? I'm a scientist. It's got to be called a mayfly, right? All right, so that was driving me nuts. And living along Lake St. Clair, we should really know the difference between a fish fly and a mayfly. Because fish flies exist. Guess what? They're a real deal thing. They look nothing like mayflies, and they're in Megaloptera. Okay? So it'll be fun for them to learn that misconception and be like, my mom, my dad, my grandpa, they were wrong all these years, you know? So it'll be fun for them to learn a little bit about their immediate area. Then we focus a little bit more specifically on some species. Now, unfortunately, there is a little bit of a discrepancy here that I just caught this morning. The discrepancy is, under the species, there are 23 bullet points here on the rules. But if you look in the study guide on, I think it's page 2, there are 25 bullet points to know. Let's go with the higher. 25 it is, okay? So I do have something to help focus our coaches and our students, because being in your shoes, I remember how big of a task this felt like, and I was wondering, because it kept mentioning basic biology, ecology of, the life of. These words are so broad. I'm essentially an ecologist, so when you tell me to know the ecology of every single one of these guys, I mean, I'm going to dig deep. You know, there's like 200 different things I can go with for ecology. So in order to focus our students and to be successful in understanding these aspects, I've given you 7 little bullet points on this other sheet. Okay? On this other sheet. There's 7 bullet points. I'm going to draw my questions. I write the exam from these bullet points. Okay? So, for every insect order, your student should know the Greek origin. That's fun, actually. Start with that. Okay? So, like, for instance, Lepidoptera, Lepido in Greek means scale, Pteura means wing. So that tells you something. Every specimen that belongs to Lepidoptera has scales on their wings. That's huge. Okay? That tells you about that order. That's the key characteristic for that order, right? Or Orthoptera, those grasshoppers and things. Ortho is straight. Pteura is wing. Ortho, straight. Oh, anybody ever been to an orthodontist? What are they trying to do to your teeth? Kids can connect with those words. Trust me, they will know Greek when this is done. Physical characteristics, what I mean by that, it's great to have them describe it and stuff, color and all that, because they have to be able to recognize it. But the key physical characteristics, like if you look at a fly, does it have 2 pairs of wings or only 1 pair? And why does it only have one pair? Well, the other pair ended up being smaller and turned into halteres, which are stabilizers for when they're flying because they're tilted and they aren't really that great of flyers in the first place. So that's a key characteristic for Diptera. No other order has that. That's what I mean by characteristics. The type of metamorphosis they belong to, I'll be honest, when my children were studying this, and when I say my children, I actually mean my child, he was in it, but we had a hard time remembering, is it complete metamorphosis, is it incomplete metamorphosis, is it gradual, is it without? So because my particular students were having a hard time with that, that's what we put on the cheat sheet. That's what we put on that sheet of paper that I knew my kids were going to get tripped up on. You will figure that out. Trust me, you're going to be quizzing them. Are you ever going to get this right? No? Okay, then we're putting it on the sheet. Okay, moving on. Habitat, diet, and roles. So that's where I'm going to draw, okay? Just know that for your insect orders, and you'll be good. You'll be good. Okay, moving on to the species, the 25 species. This is something I developed for my students when I was a coach. Because again, we were a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of information we had to know. And we did one of these for every single species we had to know. So you would need 25 of these, basically. We divvied them up among the two. So, and then when they were finished with theirs, they would kind of trade and read each other's and talk about it. And it was one way to verbalize what they were learning, what they were researching, what they were finding. And it's a good way to focus when they're researching, because when you go on the internet and when you go to a library and you read books about these organisms, you're going to get so many facts, so many cool stuff is out there about these things, but we need to focus them. I don't want to just teach to the test, obviously, but we want to focus them, so that they're successful when they walk into the exam. And when you look through this, not every species is going to be able to answer every single question. This is just some guidelines. But again, I will be drawing from this for my test questions on the exam. Some of your students may learn differently than others. Some may not do so well with pure memorization. I have a huge reader in my family. So what I did is I actually went to my public library, and I'm not kidding you, I checked out probably about 40 books. And I just said, here, read, because he loves to read. So the case of vanishing honeybees, awesome. Yes, is it full of a bunch of information that's probably not going to be on the test? Sure, but it's cool, and it's going to get them excited, and something might stick. And believe it or not, there's even an entire book in the library called Antlions. Okay? Awesome. That's one of them. Done. Right? Read it. So there's other ways for them to learn about these particular species. What I did in the first one, but I think it took up a lot of time, we'll see if we have time at the end, is I had my student here, JD, we went through one of the species really quick, and it took us maybe about a minute and a half to answer all the questions for Japanese beetle. And so it was really just a conversation between coach and student, and you can have that same conversation between student and student. And my favorite is at the end, there's room for their own idea of what they think is cool about this insect. Maybe it's not going to be on the test, but if they find anything cool about the insect, they're going to remember all the other stuff you're making them remember. Okay? As a coach, when they come out of that room, and you've been, like, especially after the practice one, you're going to be like, so how did it go? You're going to be like, did they focus on metamorphosis at all? And my son's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, was there anything on the exam you didn't know? Do we need to focus on anything else? I don't know. Well, what about when it comes to Lepidoptera? Were there any questions about migration? I'm not sure, Mom. Right? They're young, right? I'm like, do you remember anything about the exam that could help us? He goes, you know what I do? Is says, there was a live cockroach. And I'm like, okay, so here you go, right? Coaches, let's keep it real. Let's keep it real, right? Let's give them some experiences so that they're excited about science, so that they're excited about arthropods. But what are they honestly going to retain? They're going to retain the experiences they're having. So if they're having fun with each other, discussing insects, that's what they're going to remember. If they're having fun, like, I did silly stuff, like if they kept getting something wrong, every time they got a Malacostraca wrong, they had to do like 10 push-ups or something, you know, just made it really silly, and it was fun for them. As far as the box goes, or your insect collection, let's go over that, because this is important. You really do need to do this in order to do well in the competition, because it's 30% of your score. Okay? You can come without one. You won't place. And personally, as an ecologist, as a person who takes children out into the field on a regular basis to help them experience nature, I think it's the best thing for them. I think it's better than memorizing all these facts. Okay? Get them out there and have them seek and find. And the only way they're going to know how to seek and find where to collect or take a picture of these organisms is to study them first. Just to research where and how they behave. Okay? And they will have an experience. For instance, when you try to get a photograph or collect a Japanese beetle off of a leaf on a shrub, the first thing it's going to do, it's going to defend itself, right? So there's two ways it defends itself. It's either going to fly away, or it's going to drop to the ground and burrow. That's an experience. That's an awesome question for the exam, in my opinion, right? Because your student may have already experienced it instead of just reading about it. So decide whether you're going to do a pin collection or a photographic collection. That's up to you guys. We do point value. In the beginning, it's like you either have it or you don't. That's how the points go. So 3 points for each unique arthropod class. So there's 6 classes that we recommend, so you can maybe get 18 points for that. Okay? If you don't have it, you don't get the points. Insect orders, 5 points for every unique order, up to 10 orders, so you can get potentially 50 points if you get up to 10 different orders represented in your box. Doesn't mean you have to. You're better off getting more orders represented than having more specimens in one single order, if that makes sense, because the point value for order is higher than the point value for a single specimen. And then you have 30 specimens, 1 point. We don't recommend putting more than 30 specimens in your box because you won't get credit for it. Pick the best of the 30, okay?
In the previous years, there's been a maximum point value associated to the collection. Is that not the case?
Yeah. It's very strange. It adds to 108.
Okay.
I'm a teacher, a former teacher at Wayne State University, elementary department for science. I would have had it equal 100, but it's 108, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going with it. Okay? All right. So yeah, the new one is this 10-point for quality of work, and I do want to spend some time on that. Quality of work does not mean that it has to look perfect, because this is supposed to be done by the student. When my students were putting the box together, I literally had to walk out of the room. Okay? Because I'm a perfectionist, and it wasn't going the way I would have thought it should go. The first time we did the box, we wrote all of our labels. That's tough, especially for boys. So that's fine if you write your labels as long as we can read them, or if you type your labels. One is not going to be a better quality of work just because it looks neater. You see what I'm saying? What I mean by quality of work, I mean that the student represented each of their insect orders in the proper groups. They're not just scattered all over the place. or the labels have exactly what we've asked to be on each label, in every label. For instance, for our Lepidoptera one here, it says Lepidoptera, perfect. Michigan, perfect. The date is there, perfect. The county, Macomb. The city, St. Clair Shores. And who collected it? J.D. Anderson. And what was the insect doing when you collected it? Apparently, our Lepidoptera was in our cat's mouth. Perfect. Right? That's what this collection is all about. Now, you could purchase a expensive Cornell box online, or if you know anyone in the office that gets reams of paper, usually the office boxes are like this high. You cut that part out, and you put this on, fits perfectly, and you let them decorate it. I don't recommend painting it. We did that one year, and when you paint it, when the paint dries, it kind of rolls up. So we did tape instead. We also have a new thing where we're recommending that you use vials for soft-bodied organisms. And if you're interested in how to use vials and how to pin them the way I did in a box where I could lift it up like this and they're not rolling around, that's pretty cool, isn't it? I do have some YouTube videos available for you to watch online. There's 3 different videos. One is about using the vials. The other is about relaxing your specimens after you take them out of the freezer. And the other is about how to pin these specimens successfully. Now, the reason why we're using vials this year for soft-bodied organisms is because I was a coach and a mom. And guess what happens when you have one centipede in your collection and it's hard as a rock because it's coming out of the freezer, it's dead. And your student, who is like, I don't know, between the ages of 9 and 11, has this fragile centipede on styrofoam and a tiny little pin, and he's going to press it, and he's supposed to be gentle. Well, if they're not gentle, the pin goes through, and the specimen cracks, and all the legs fall off. And then the mom gets to deal with the aftermath of that. There's tears, there's anger, there's what do we do now? Well, you gotta go find another centipede. Best place to find them is a boy's urinal. Okay? So you, like I said, you're gonna get weird. Your kids are gonna come out of a urinal and they're gonna be like, there was a centipede in there, and you're gonna be like, go back in! Get it! But it's in a urinal, I don't care! Okay? You're gonna get really weird. You're gonna hope your dog has fleas this year. So, in a vial, you take it out of the freezer, you let it relax a little bit, and then you can put it right in.
What's the fluid in there?
Isopropyl alcohol, right from the grocery store. Simple. Soft-bodied organisms only are allowed in insect vials. Your hard-bodied organisms still need to be pinned. So soft-bodied, collembola, your springtails, absolutely. Your centipedes, millipedes, Chilopoda, Diplopoda, those ones, definitely. I would not try to pin a spider. Nope, wouldn't do it. Trust me, legs are gonna fall off. Kids are gonna cry. Don't do it. They shrivel up. They decompose too, especially a fat-bodied one. Yeah.
So if there's one in the freezer right now and it's shriveled, are you saying that when I relax it, it's gonna open up? Or
It could, or it'll relax in there.
okay.
Because some of it'll fill in. Yeah. Things like bees that have hair on them or digestive juices you don't really want to put in alcohol because it wouldn't work out. So I have listed exactly what you can put in alcohol and exactly what you shouldn't. Okay.
What is the hard body one? My kids did it last year, and like they would go through like a cricket or a grasshopper, and when they pinned it, it just cracked hard. Because
Yeah,
I think the freezing is just horrible for them.
Well, there's a process called relaxing them or rehydrating them.
We tried that.
Yeah.
Followed what it said in the papers last year, but it just never worked.
And sometimes it doesn't.
Okay.
We pinned our one and only mantis praying mantis, and the leg fell off during the process, so we just pinned the leg right next to it and made it look like it was still on.
The school that won told me they were gluing all their bugs together. They would
You can.
really glue the
For
bugs.
instance, our Lepidopteran right now, if I took this pin off, oh, that's his head. So we just put the head where it should be. Okay, it happens, people. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, we had a headless Lepidoptera, essentially, and we got full point value. Your Dermopteras, your earwigs, those are hard to pin as well. They're hard. If the seriously, the stuff that is important for an identifying factor for that particular insect falls off, glue, or find another one. It's important, like Malacostratus or the roly-polies, you know, get like 20 of them, okay? Have them practice with that. And don't practice with your one and only praying mantis, just saying. You know, so, yeah.
Any questions, sorry. As far as getting the bugs, is there any things we're allowed to get them from? Like, how do we get the bugs? I mean, it's winter right now and coming up in May. Are we allowed to get them donated from nature centers? Are we?
You have to actually collect these.
Collect them.
But you could go to a nature center and look in their windowsills. Trust me, they're there. You could go to your cabin and look in windowsills. You can, where did we get our cockroach? We got our cockroach on the steps of Wayne State University's science hallways. They're there, alive and well. All of our centipedes came from, our house centipedes came from our home, or urinals. When spring hits, that's when you're going to do a lot of your collection. Turning over rocks, logs, decomposing logs. Springtails are now, though. The best time to get springtails are now.
Where would you go?
They're like near a tree.
Okay.
They'll look like little pepper on the snow. And if you watch close enough, that pepper is moving like fleas. And you collect them with a little spoon and you put them in a Ziploc bag and you freeze them.
Aren't those kind of big?
Springtails are not big. No. No, very small. Smaller than fleas. Yeah.
Oh, it's a silver
Any
fish.
specific kind of tree, like a maple versus an oak?
No, I think you'll find them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you'll find them.
First thing I did was scoop leaf litter, bring it into my house, and as it warmed up, the
Yeah.
first one I saw, it was a dot with antennae. I could see no details except for that it was a dot with antennae.
What we were saying over here is you could also go and get leaf litter and bring it into the home. And as it warms up, a lot of things start to move. Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. Our first year, you feel it as a disadvantage. I will say this. You do feel at a disadvantage if you are a first year person versus a second year person. Because the second year person, they started this summer collecting, trust me. Trust me, because their mom or their dad or their coach didn't want to do what they did the first year because it's a little more tough. But I think there's a sunny day coming up that's going to hit maybe 35 degrees. You would be surprised. I hate to say it, but animal feces, there's always something flying around. Okay? Look closely at the leaf litter right now. That's a really good way to do it. Yeah.
When you said not to go more than like 30 in your collection, if that's the limit, say you put in 35, which the concern we had last year when we were doing it is there was a couple that they weren't sure if they had labeled correctly. So they put a few extras in to make sure they still got 30 that were correctly labeled. You know what I'm saying? Because if you have 20, if you have 30 and you only have 28 of them labeled.
If you're not sure, don't use it.
Well, when you're kind of like scrambling at the last minute.
But you had 35.
Well, it was, I can't remember how it came down.
The circumstances,
It was trying
yeah.
to get to a certain thing, and we were like, well,
When
we'll
we
put
weren't
extras in case
sure,
that
we
doesn't count.
didn't use it.
Or if we weren't
For our
sure
own
if you counted
purposes.
the pieces, like say something came apart, and yes, we were gluing, And we didn't know, oh my gosh, are they gonna count that or they're not gonna count that? Okay, well, we'll put an extra in case they don't count that one. This
I
one's a
have
better
to-
one, but.
I might have to address that on the facts page,
Okay.
because I don't know how I'm going to, I have to ponder that one a little bit. But I will get you a straight answer.
I think that's what they told us last year, the
Absolutely.
guy that was here said, if you're not sure, you won't
I
get
would
points, like if
think
you
so.
later pulled a
And please,
grasshopper or a butterfly.
Do not try to identify these things to species. I don't care what species of ant you have, okay? I don't care what species of grasshopper, just that it's Orthoptera, okay? Because if you put the species on there, then I feel inclined to grade it.
Sure, it's right.
Yeah, and more times than not, it's not right, okay?
I'm thinking whatever we had was like a weird one that we think it's this order, we think it might get counted, but we didn't
You
know.
cannot put insects that do not belong in this region. You will not get points for those. Period. Please. Don't do it. Question.
We do the picture format generally.
Yes.
And we put in more than 30 when we can because, you know how it says like, if you can't see enough detail to call it what it is in your picture. So we put multiple pictures of the same thing on a line,
Which
and say
is-
that they're all the same.
That's
fine.
recommended.
But we put in a couple extra, when we could, just in case what we thought was clear enough to see, you didn't think was clear enough to see.
Understood.
But it's easier with pictures, I think, than specimens is fitting it into.
Yeah, you
nice-
only have so much space. And this does fit the criteria of the size requirement. It's slightly smaller though. I couldn't come up with a box that was exactly the criteria of a Cornell box without spending the money on a Cornell box. So this is what we went through, or went with. But as you can see, all 30 specimens represented here, it's crowded. So it's tough, you know, if you were to add more, it is tough. Another recommendation, if you are going to use the vials, we are selling them here today, and the insect pins. If you're going to use those, do not, when you're transporting it in your car to the competition, keep the vials maybe in your pocket, because if they break loose and roll around, heads are going to be falling off. Like, it's not going to look pretty when you submit it.
Our kid dropped it walking into the room
I
last
know, it's so sad.
year. And the vials went everywhere.
It's
It was
so
closed lid, so it
sad.
was still in the box. But I had 2 teams and 2
Yeah,
collections and one was just all
it
over the
is
place.
hard, it is.
Because then it breaks the other specimens.
And the reason why we're selling the vials is these are actually biological grade vials that will not leak. They're poly-sealed. And a lot of the other things that people have used in the past, like film canisters, baby food jars, they leak. And the alcohol dissipates and then you end up with a crumbled up specimen. These are tight. All right, well, I think that's us. I'm open for any questions. Yeah, oh, sure. This is the same picture on the study guide.